Welcome to Crisis in Perception. So today, we're going to dig into something that's supposed to be our greatest strength, but what if it's also our biggest weakness? I'm talking about intelligence itself.
Let me ask you a question. Why do some of the absolute smartest people you can think of sometimes believe the absolute strangest things? You'd think being a genius would protect you from big mistakes, right? Well, it turns out the real story is way more complicated.
And this whole explainer is based on the incredible work in David Robson's book, The Intelligence Trap. We're going to use his ideas to unpack this paradox, to figure out why being brilliant can sometimes be, well, a trap.
All right, to really get a feel for this, let's start with a story. And this story is a perfect example of what we're talking about. It's about a Nobel Prize winner named Kary Mullis.
So this is Kary Mullis, a biochemist, got his PhD from UC Berkeley. By any standard, an incredibly brilliant guy.
Now, this wasn't just some small discovery. Mullis won the Nobel Prize for inventing something called the polymerase chain reaction. You've probably heard it called PCR. It's how we copy DNA. And just to give you a sense of how big a deal this was, scientists literally talk about biology in two eras, BM and AM, before Mullis and after Mullis. It's that fundamental.
Okay, but here's where things get weird. The same genius who changed biology forever, he also believed he was once abducted by aliens. And not just any aliens. He described them as glowing, raccoon-like creatures.
And look, it wasn't just the glowing raccoons. He was a huge believer in astrology. He thought people could travel on the astral plane. And get this, he publicly denied that HIV causes AIDS. He even denied that the hole in the ozone layer was real. These were solid scientific facts even back then. So you have to ask yourself, how can a certified genius be so incredibly wrong about so many things? And that leads to the really fascinating question here. What if the same brain power that let him win a Nobel Prize was the same thing that led him down these rabbit holes? What if his intelligence wasn't a shield, but actually the tool he used to convince himself of these bizarre ideas?
And that very paradox, well, that's exactly what David Robson calls the intelligence trap. So let's break down exactly what that means. Okay, so think of it like this. Robson says intelligence is like having a car with a massive, powerful engine. It's pure horsepower. It can go really, really fast. But if you don't have good steering, if you don't have things like humility and good judgment, that powerful engine just helps you drive in the wrong direction faster than anyone else.
And this is where a really important idea comes into play. It's called motivated reasoning. Basically, it's the idea that we often use our intelligence not to find the truth, but to defend what we already believe. So our brain isn't acting like a curious scientist trying to find the facts. Nope. It's acting like a lawyer hired to win the case for a client it's already committed to. Okay, so let's see how this actually works in practice. I want to show you a study. Researcher Dan Kahan showed people this table. It's about crime rates in cities with and without a handgun ban. The numbers are a little tricky, so just take a quick look. And ask yourself, based on what you see here, did the ban work? All right, if you actually run the numbers, the correct answer is that crime went up with the ban. But here's the crazy part. Kahan found that people who were good at math were more likely to get the answer wrong if it went against their political views. Think about that. They literally used their smarts to justify the wrong answer. This just shows it so perfectly. Sometimes being smarter doesn't fight bias. It just makes you better at being biased.
And this isn't just something that happens inside our own heads. The problem is that the systems we're all a part of, our schools, our workplaces, they often make this problem even worse. They actually build the trap for us.
Just think about it, right? When you were in school, who got the gold star? The kid who shot their hand up with a fast, confident answer? Or the kid who sat back and said, I'm not sure, let me think about it. And at work, we praise leaders for being decisive and certain. We don't exactly celebrate the boss who says, you know what, I have no idea. So we're basically trained from a young age to defend our ideas, not to question them.
And when you take this whole dynamic and apply it to teams, something really unexpected happens, especially when you put a bunch of superstar performers together in one room.
There's this thing called the too much talent effect. Researchers looked at everyone from Wall Street analysts to pro sports teams, and they found that, yeah, adding star players helps, but only up to a point. After that, when you have too many stars on one team, performance actually goes down. Why? Well, egos get in the way. People start competing for the spotlight instead of working together. It's a huge lesson. Just having talent on your team isn't enough.
Okay, so if raw intelligence can actually be part of the problem, then what's the solution? Well, thankfully, Robson says there is an antidote to the intelligence trap.
And it's not about being more intelligent. It's about developing a completely different set of skills, what Robson calls evidence-based wisdom. This isn't about how fast your brain works. It's about how you use it. It's about developing things like intellectual humility, open-mindedness, basically using your brain power to find the truth, not just to prove you were right all along.
And here's the really great news. Unlike your IQ, which is pretty much set, these wisdom skills, they're things you can actually learn and practice. We can all get better at being humble, we can all get better at being curious, and we can all become better thinkers.
So, this brings us all the way back to the main idea of this show, the crisis in perception. I love this quote from Laszlo Bock, who used to be in charge of hiring at Google. He said the #1 thing he looked for wasn't raw intelligence, it was humility. He wanted people who could fight for their ideas, but, and this is the key part, who could also say, you know what, you've made a better point, I was wrong. That's the skill that really matters.
And this is really the heart of it all. The problem isn't that we have a shortage of smart people. The problem is we have a shortage of systems that reward wisdom. We've built a world that celebrates the powerful engine, but we forgot to build in a steering wheel.
So I'll leave you with this question to think about. What would our world look like if we started rewarding intellectual humility just as much as we reward intelligence? What if we celebrated the person who can admit they were wrong just as much as the person who claims they're always right? Just imagine that for a second.